Before I jump in today, I just want to say thank you to each of you. My wife and I have been here. It's our third Sunday. You have received us with open arms. It's really an incredible place. I said that on our first Sunday. We recognized it early. But it's like the further you go along, it's just like, man, this is special. And so I want to publicly honor you. Thank you for receiving us. It's been a really incredible few weeks, and we're really excited for all that's ahead. I want to go ahead and jump in this morning. We are in our Pause series. Who's enjoyed this series so far? Throw your hand up. It's been really, really incredible. Today I have the privilege of closing it out. It's week 4, and I've talked to several people over the last 2 or 3 weeks just about this series and what all God's doing, what all's happening. And here's what I'm seeing. This series is confronting some really pivotal areas in our life. It's confronting 2 things. It's confronting our pace. Everybody say pace. Y'all are going to have to work with me here. I'm used to talking to youth, and if you don't have them repeat after you, they start lolling off to sleep. So, all right, we're going to have to work through this morning. The first thing it's confronting is our pace. And here's the reality. Our society is trying to force upon us a pace that is normal for America, but it's contrary to what God has for our life. And if we're not careful, if we're not intentional about resisting that pull toward this rampant pace, then we'll find ourselves drifting into that pace into a very, very, very unhealthy spot. And I recognize as I'm sharing this morning, there's people who are like, yes, I've been there before. Anybody want to be honest and say, yeah, I've embraced a pace in my life that just led me into a place of overwhelm, led me into a place of panic, led me into a place where I just felt like I didn't have time for anything else that was important. This series is confronting that. We're standing toe-to-toe saying there is a better way. The second thing this series is confronting is our lack of pause. Not only do we run at this rampant pace, but we also don't know how to stop. Isn't that scary? That's like a double whammy right there, right? Crazy pace, don't know how to stop, and here's what's happening. We have chaos and havoc that's being wreaked on our homes, our families, our marriages, our kids. I could go on down the list, our purpose, our calling, our workplace, everything that's important to us. But here's the good news. God is inviting us, that's every person in this room, everybody watching online, everybody in the coffee shop overflow, everyone. He's inviting us into a brand new way of living. Isn't that good news? It's really good news, especially for the people who have found themselves in the place of overwhelm. It's like, man, this is not the way that I was called to live. But he is offering us a new way of living. And this way of living right here is filled with rest, with the stillness in your soul that you have been aching for, maybe for years. This place that he's inviting us to step into is the place that you have been aching for in your life. And we're going to talk about that today. The first thing we must know this morning, if you're taking notes, you can write this down. The gateway, everybody say gateway. The gateway into this way of living that I'm describing, the gateway into this new, better way of living is prayer. Write it down, is prayer. Some of you are like, yeah, I pray. Yeah, I do. I pray before bed. I pray before mealtime. I got this down. We're good. No, I'm talking about something that is beyond that. For many people in this room, I said prayer. It's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to pray, right? Every Christian knows I'm supposed to pray. But it's like the pace and the lack of pause in our life causes us to feel like we don't have time for it. Listen to this. If you're for the workaholic, prayer feels like an inconvenience. For the high-capacity leader, prayer feels unproductive. And for the person who's just in a hurry all the time, prayer is just something that forces you to slow down. And that's a scary, scary, scary place to be, because until we understand that prayer is, in fact, the most powerful thing we can do with our lives, our soul will not experience rest. And so we've got to make a choice today as we close out this series. Will we continue in the ways which we've known? Will we continue in the ways that society is trying to teach us and pull us into? Or will we make a change as husbands, fathers, mothers, wives, kids, youngest to the oldest? Will we make a choice that I'm not going to walk or run at the pace which society tries to lead me to, but I'm going to find the pace of Jesus and I'm going to walk with him? Because the people that say yes to that invitation will experience rest. Shout rest. You will experience rest. I want to invite you to go to Matthew chapter 11. There's 3 commands in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. If you're flipping there, if you're scrolling there, they're going to be on the screen here in just a moment. But there's 3 commands we have to understand in Matthew 11 if we're going to truly live a lifestyle of rest. And I want to be clear before we read this right here. When I say rest, like, it's better than your Sunday afternoon power nap. How many of you love a good power nap? Like, this rest I'm talking about is way better than that. And that's pretty good. This rest I'm talking about is not something you have to go and get again and then lose and then get and then lose. This rest I'm talking about is something that can actually be constant in your life for the rest of your life. Matthew 11, verse 28 through 30, Jesus gives us 3 commands. I'm going to read all 3 verses, and then we're going to talk through those 3 things. Verse 28 says, "Come to me." This is Jesus talking. "All you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you what? I will give you rest." Verse 29, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find" what? "Rest for your souls." Last verse, verse 30. "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." The first thing, back to 28 if you would, the first thing we've got to understand this morning, if we're going to truly enter into a place of rest, there is something that is required of us. We have to come to Jesus. All right, that's the first 3 words right here in verse 28. He says, "Come to me." And if you really want to experience this true rest that I'm talking about, if you really want to experience this true rest that Pastor Dan's talked about for the past 3 weeks, you have to come to Jesus. And honestly, this right here, this is what prayer is. That's 3 words that beautifully sum up what prayer is. It is us coming to him. It is us recognizing that, hey, the pressures that I've carried upon myself in this life are crushing me, and I can't carry it by myself. So I do what? I come to him. I give it to him. This is this lifestyle of prayer that we're talking about this morning. It's a beautiful invitation. In fact, it's the best invitation that you'll ever get. It's better than any birthday party, any bridal shower. It's the best card you could ever get in the mail. Come to where? To me. That's what Jesus is saying. Come to me. And if we truly learn to do that, what's the promise? I will give you what? Rest. It's beautiful. He didn't say, watch this, he didn't say I might give you rest. He didn't say I'm considering it. He didn't say, 90% sure, there's a good shot. No, he said, I will give you rest. It's a promise to every person that comes to him. You will receive rest. And I wonder sometimes what keeps people out of prayer. Sure, it's the busyness of life and the go, go, go of life, sure. But sometimes what keeps us from prayer is we think we've got it. You with me? Can we be honest about that today? We think we've got it. We think we're strong enough to just grit our way through this thing. And all the while, we've got a smile on our face, but we are being crushed on the inside because we refuse to come to him. It sounds like pride to me. That's what it sounds like. But God's inviting us to throw that to the side, recognize that, hey, I don't have to walk through this life being crushed by the circumstances that come my way. I don't have to walk through this life being crushed by prior experiences. But I can actually come to him and experience a rest that is beyond anything I have ever known. Who we're talking to today is those who labor and are heavy laden. The word heavy laden there just means that you are carrying a heavy load. And the invitation is true to you today, to come to him and discover what it means to truly rest. Here's the second one. First one was come to me. Go on to 29 if you would. The second one is to this is Jesus still, take my yoke upon you. All right. To understand what's really happening here in verse 29, we've got to understand what a yoke is. And this is not like the egg yolk. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's Y-O-L-K. That's 0 for 1. That didn't land right there. 0 for 1 this morning. He says, take my yoke. We've got to understand what a yoke is. A yoke was an old piece of farming equipment. You'll still see them today from time to time, especially in third world countries, but technology has advanced so far that a lot of, in America, you just don't see it as much. I think I have a photo of a yoke. I don't know if Christian was able to put that in there or not. I gave it to him this morning. Okay, yeah, that's perfect. That's a yoke right there, all right? Everybody say yoke. A yoke was a wooden piece that was hand-carved, handmade, that would actually connect 2 animals. We can use oxen, 2 pieces of cattle that were trying to plow a field or perform some sort of thing for the farmer, and they would yoke these 2 animals together. Go ahead and go to the animal one if you would. They would yoke these 2 animals together it would keep them together. And what it allowed them to do was it allowed them to carry a heavier load because they were strapped together. Does that make sense? And it's a beautiful picture this morning because what Jesus is saying is that many people, both in Jesus' day when he was talking, but also today, and it'll be true forever until we go on to be with the Lord, a lot of people are carrying a yoke that is crushing them because they are carrying a yoke they were never meant to carry. Picture this, like we're walking through life. When we're in front of people, we're standing tall, we're smiling, but behind closed doors, we're just limping and stumbling through because the weight of our circumstances pressing us down. You with me? It's hard to experience the true rest that Jesus is talking about when we're carrying upon us a weight, a pressure, whatever you want to call it, a yoke that we were never meant to carry. And here's what Jesus is saying. Hey, that yoke you've been carrying, let's go ahead and get rid of that thing so that you can take my yoke. Let's go ahead and toss that one to the side right here, 29. Take my yoke upon you. Here's what we have an opportunity for. We have an opportunity to literally cast the yoke we've been carrying to the side and ask Jesus to place his yoke upon us. How many of you know that's a good exchange? How many of you know that beats any investment in the S&P 500? That beats anything in the NASDAQ. Like that's the best investment you could ever make is to exchange and trade what you've been carrying for what he has made available to us. And here's what's cool. While the old yoke has been crushing you, the new yoke is the one of rest. It's the one of peace. It's the one of joy. It's what your soul has been aching for in the night. You with me? It's what your soul said, man, I need that desperately. I need it right now. How about this? It's time that we remove the yoke that has bound us and we put on ourselves the yoke that Jesus has made available to us. 2 commands so far. First, if you want to experience true rest, you've got to come to Jesus. It's called prayer, right? 2, you've got to take his yoke upon you. You got to do away with the yoke of the past that's just made you feel miserable all this time. There's a third command we've got to get today. And it's right here in 29. Take my yoke upon you and what? What's the next word? And learn from me. And learn from me. Here's the picture. We have come to Jesus with our burdens. We have begun this lifestyle of prayer and interaction that we just come to him and say, Father, I'm being crushed by the weight of this. I need to come to you. This is me coming to you saying, take that yoke off of me and give me the yoke that you've had for me all along. Here's the picture. When we take the yoke of Jesus upon us, we are no longer standing underneath that yoke by ourselves. If you would just look to your left in this moment, not in this moment, in the moment that I'm talking about, you would see that he is actually standing beside you, carrying the yoke with you. Isn't it beautiful? It's this beautiful moment that your heart has been so longing for. But even beyond that, it's this beautiful moment that God's heart has been so longing for. He loves that moment where you have taken his yoke upon you. And what happens is you begin this journey of learning from him. It's this, like you and Jesus are just plowing the field together. You with me? Side by side, carrying this yoke upon you. Y'all are just learning. You're learning from him. He's teaching you. You're doing this life thing together. When overwhelming circumstances start happening in your life, he's right there with you. And you're able to say in this lifestyle of prayer, Father, that's tough right there. That seems to be trying to crush me. And what he's doing, this is awesome. What he's doing, he's saying, you're going to make it, son. You're going to make it, daughter. You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right because I'm standing here with you, right? We're doing this thing together. I'm not going to leave you out to dry. I'm not leaving you under this burden all by yourself, but you've taken my yoke upon you. And so I'm going to stand here with you and we're going to do this thing together. And all of a sudden, what would have once crushed you, now you get to stand strong underneath it and walk with Jesus through it. And there's people in this room that have experienced that too, right? We talked about at the beginning how we've all probably most of us in here have drifted into an unhealthy pace with a lack of pause and drifted from prayer. But there's people in this room who can sit here and say, yeah, I have been that, but I've also experienced the other side where I have brought my burdens to the Lord in prayer and watched as I've all of a sudden been able to carry them because he stepped underneath that yoke with me. And I think it's such a beautiful thing as we walk through this, linked together with the Lord. And this is the picture of prayer. Watch this. Me and Jesus carrying a yoke walking through life, as I learn from him. He's teaching me his perspective. He's teaching me his wisdom through the Word of God. Every single day when I open it, he is showing me his way of seeing. He is showing me his way that he has called us to do life. He's inviting us into a brand new lifestyle that looks just like that. And here's what I want to say this morning. Prayer is not an action that we do. It is a lifestyle that we live. Prayer is not an action that we do. Prayer is the way that we live. Man, isn't that good? It's not just about lay me down to sleep or Father bless this food. It's not even just about God give my kids grace today. It's a lifestyle where me and him are yoked together as one, walking through life together. When circumstance comes, he and I are just communing together. We're just having conversation together. Right? It's this lifestyle of prayer. There's 3 quick verses here. Philippians 4, I don't know if y'all have those or not. It says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, or there it is, I was quoting New King James, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about what? Let's try that again. Instead, pray about what? Last time I checked, everything meant everything. You can go back to the Hebrew. You can go back to the Greek. You can find whatever language you want to find. Everything means everything. There ought to never be a problem or a circumstance or a care that comes on our life that we don't have a conversation with him about. This is this lifestyle of prayer. 1 Thessalonians 5, a familiar passage right here, just simply says that we are called to pray without ceasing. Who's heard that in here? Throw your hand up. Pray without ceasing. Prayer is not supposed to have an end. It is something that we do together. It is something that we do as we walk through this life. I hope you get the picture this morning, because I'm using me and Jesus up here walking side by side, but that's you and him too, right? Underneath this yoke, walking through life together. Can I tell you this? Here's what God's going to teach you as you walk with him. He's going to teach you a new pace. If 2 oxen are underneath a yoke, and one of them is walking too fast, what happens? Can you get the picture? One of them's outrunning the other. We call this going in what? Right? Sometimes we feel like we do that with God, and he has the utmost patience with us, doesn't he? Because instead of just scorning us or shaming us, he's just working on, hey, slow down right there. This is where, let me show you my pace. Sometimes he might be moving quicker and you're dragging your feet like he's calling you into something and you're afraid to jump. Sometimes he's just graciously having to drag us along like, come on, I've got a plan. It's beautiful. It's better than you could ever imagine. Just stay with me. I know it's tough. I know you're afraid of what's ahead, but I need you to be filled with such great courage right now because I've got a plan that'll blow your mind, right? And so we're learning how to match his pace. We're learning how to stay with him. We're learning how to not get ahead of him. This is the pace that our heart is longing for. When you get too far ahead of him, it's why all that anxiety and that stuff settles in. You with me? It's why all of that fret and that panic settles in, because you have gotten ahead of him when we were called to stay with him. He's going to teach you new rhythms. He's going to teach you through his word and through just conversating with him, through discipleship, through community. He's going to show you this rhythm of rest that he's called us to live in. Honestly, sometimes the American dream sounds more like an American nightmare to me, because it teaches you that you have to go to get as much as you can as fast as you can, and then life can begin. No, not a chance. There's another way that we're called to live. It's the pace of Jesus, right? It's me with him. Underneath this yoke, not the yoke that I used to have. That thing's just done and gone. It's somewhere back there now. I'm learning to carry a new yoke, and it's his yoke. There's one thing I've left out intentionally about the yoke that I wanted to say for this moment. A lot of times, will you put the oxen picture back up there, the 2 oxen together? A lot of times, if you were to be back in this Bible time, standing at a fence, looking out over a field, you would see a yoke, but underneath that yoke would be one big, burly, firm, intimidating oxen, very much like the one you see right there. But beside him, you would see a little bit, I don't even know what a baby oxen would be called, but just a little, hadn't been in the world long. very little, very fragile, very frail. Why would you see that? Because back in the day, when they used these yokes, they would use seasoned, experienced oxen to train the younger oxen in the way that they should go when they were plowing the field and carrying heavy loads of machinery. Why am I telling you that? Because when God promised to give us rest, as we come to him and take his yoke upon us and learn from him, he didn't promise that our circumstances would always change. He didn't promise that things would always get better. How many of you have ever been in a season where you just said, Father, I just need you to make that thing stop? One of them in my life was when my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It was like, this is one thing. No, make that go away right there. I don't want to have nothing to do with that. There's stories like that all over this room. No, to heck with that. Get out. No, I don't have time for that. Are you kidding me? The person I love in my life, like, no, not a chance, not today. 23 months later, my dad passed away. I really stood in a moment right there that was like, no, this has got to be a joke. Are you kidding me? God never promised us that the circumstance would get better. But can I tell you what he did promise? He did promise that when we stand in that circumstance that seems to be crushing us, that he wouldn't let us carry it alone. And I felt like that young ox in that moment, looking up at Jesus being the seasoned ox that he is, firm and strong, could carry any load all by himself. And I recognized that the yoke, as I came to God in that season, as I took the death of my dad and said, Father, I'm desperately needing your help right now. And I just ran to him and said, Father, I'm not going to be able to go on if you don't help me. As I came to him, he began to teach me a new perspective. He took the yoke that I carried that was crushing me off of me. He put his yoke on me. I looked up at him and I saw him. And I realized I wasn't hardly carrying any weight at all. Why? Because he's the one that's carrying it. I look at a little ox and it's like, man, he's not carrying his weight, right? How many of you have ever been frustrated because you're with a kind of a weaker guy and you're carrying something heavy and you feel like you're carrying it all by yourself? I was on the other end of that in that moment. And I had so much honor for the Lord. I just recognized, man, my circumstance got worse and worse and worse. But all of a sudden, as I spent time with the Lord, I was able to carry it. And here I stand 7 years later, this day. Not because I did anything special. Not because I was strong and had the grit to fight through. But because I recognized that thing would have crushed me if I had not run to him. And so 7 years ago, I threw it off and I stepped under the yoke with Jesus. And it's been a beautiful journey as he's taught me how he sees life. As he's taught me that life's true. When death happens for the Christian, life is truly not over. Death is never the end for the Christian. There is a hope that is set ahead of us. And I hold on to the fact that one day I'm going to see my dad again, and it's going to be the most special moment as we celebrate the fact that Jesus really did pay an incredible price for us. I'm 28 years old. I hope the Lord gives me 50 or 60 more years. And I recognize that there will be more circumstances come on my life that would try and crush me. But my greatest prayer for my own life is that I would never take upon myself the yoke of the world again, but that I would stand underneath the yoke of Jesus and look up at that big ox. I don't want to reduce him to an ox, but it's a cool picture right here, that I would look up and recognize how strong and how mighty that he really is, and recognize that what I can't carry, he can. And I'm telling you, the greatest place of rest that you'll ever stand is when you recognize that you can't do it. And you look up and you recognize that he can. Would you stand with me all across the room? This is the picture of prayer right here. Two oxen walking together through life. Us learning from him. Man, he's a great teacher. Anybody say, man, you've learned that? He is a great teacher. Here's my promise to you, and I can only promise it because he promised it. I promise that as you come to him, the yoke that you carried that's been crushing you won't crush you anymore. He'll throw it off of your life and give you a brand new one. And as you walk with him, he's going to teach you a new way of seeing, and you will find rest for your souls. Can I tell you what else you're going to find? We got to finish out Matthew 11:30, and then I'm going to pray. Matthew 11:30. Here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that his yoke, talking about Jesus, is what? Easy. Not because the circumstance got lighter, just because he stepped under the yoke and started carrying it. and you're going to find that his burden is light. Right? Y'all ever tried to carry something heavy and somebody's just burly and strong on the other side and you just feel like you're not having to do anything, but you're trying to do a courtesy and you're grunting to try and prove that you're really carrying your weight? You know what I'm talking about? It's that. His yoke is easy. It's like, man, I can carry this. That situation sucked. It felt like hell. It felt like I was literally living hell. But it got light and easy because he stood under that yoke and he started carrying it with me. Yeah, does that make sense to everyone? That's good stuff right there. It's awesome. We're about to go into a couple of songs right here. But here's what this moment's about. This moment, for many people in this room, is an opportunity for you to do what Matthew 11:28 says and to come to Jesus. It's not difficult because Jesus went to the cross and rose from the grave. Like, we have free access to come to him, and it's a beautiful thing. And that's what this moment's about for many people in this room. You just need to come to him and you need to say, the yoke that I've been carrying all of my life. Some of you may have had something happen 10 years ago and you're still carrying the weight of that. It's time you make an exchange today. Cast the yoke off and ask him for his. Some of you in here, that's the first. Some of you in here, this moment right here that we're about to step into, you're walking with Jesus, you've come to him, you're walking underneath that yoke with him, you recognize how mighty that he is, but you're in a situation right now that doesn't make sense to you. You need to look up to him and ask him for his perspective on your circumstance. You need to ask him for his level of understanding. He's going to teach you how he sees. And as you see how he sees, you're going to begin to live a totally different way that is way better. Whichever moment is yours, whichever way you need to go right there. I just want you to bow your heads. I don't want you to worry about anything else. I just want you to come to him. I want you to ask him to take that yoke off of your life and to give you a brand new one. And if you're the other one, I just want you to say, Father, I just need you to teach me your way of seeing. Father, I'm grateful today that you have made it possible for us to live a lifestyle of rest. Father, I'm thankful that through prayer, through a lifestyle of prayer, that we can walk in what's been made possible and what's been made available to us. Lord, I thank you that you did not leave us in the seasons of overwhelm, that you did not leave us in the seasons where circumstances tried to crush us. But you stood underneath that yoke with us and helped us carry what we never could have carried on our own. Father, my greatest desire is that somehow, some way, through our circumstances, through the circumstances of every single person in this room, that Jesus would be glorified and that the world would know that he is Lord. We bless you, Father, in Jesus' name.